The Founding Fathers, American Revolution, our Constitution, our history, America. Thanks so much for tuning in as we discuss the people, places, events, and battles that turned 13 separate colonies into the greatest nation on earth, the United States.
Welcome back, Patriots. I'm your host, Ron Kern, and if you love the grit, determination, and untold stories of the American Revolution, you are in the right place, and I do appreciate you tuning in. My connection to this history runs pretty deep. My fifth great-grandfather, Peter Kern, fought in the American Revolution, and his legacy fuels my passion, and it, I think, gives me a unique perspective and definitely pretty hardcore passion on the heroes who helped shape our nation. I just released the fourth book in the Young Patriots series, which are books for children that help them learn about the Revolution and the important people. And it was the first book in the series to feature a woman, and it's called Martha Washington, Our First Lady. You can find all of the books on my website or by clicking the links in the podcast description. You can also just search my name, Ronald Kern, K-E-R-N, at Amazon, and all of my books will pop right up. My goal is to have at least one a month, but hopefully 2 new titles each month. And the next book, the fifth in the series, is going to be about Benjamin Franklin. In today's 56th episode, we are going to be talking about what I touched on a little bit in episode 36 and episode 37, which is the Bombardment of Boston. Now, this only took place because of the truly amazing task that Henry Knox completed. In fact, it's considered one of the most amazing military feats to date. So make sure you check out those episodes, part 1 and part 2, prior to listening to this one if you have not already. As winter slowly loosened its grip in early March of 1776, the city of Boston stood on the brink of a major turning point. For nearly a year, British forces pretty much had been trapped in the city, under siege by Washington and the Continental Army. Their supplies were dwindling, and the morale among the British troops and the loyalists who supported them inside Boston were getting quite low. So the Americans, however, they had been planning and waiting for the right exact moment to strike. And that moment arrived in the first few days of March, and Washington put into motion a very bold plan that would hopefully force the British out for good. It all began with an artillery bombardment, and one that was carefully orchestrated to conceal an even bigger move. So on the night of March 2nd, the Americans opened fire on British positions in Boston from multiple points around the city. Cannons roared from Lechmere Point in Cambridge, Cobble Hill in Somerville, and even from Lamb's Dam in Roxbury. The goal? Well, those were all distractions in keeping the British pinned down. Hopefully, it would make them believe that an attack on Boston itself was imminent. And the shelling with these cannons were relentless. They fired every night for 4 days straight. Their guns thundering across the frozen Charles River. In fact, the British soldiers inside Boston actually kind of hunkered down and huddled in their fortifications. They took on this huge storm of cannon fire, and their nerves were fraying with each passing night. Now, the top guy for British, General William Howe, he was commanding the garrison. He found himself in a pretty desperate position because the Americans weren't just firing, haphazardly. They were actually probing for weaknesses. And more importantly, they were going to set the stage for something much bigger. So one observer that was inside Boston at the time described the scene in a letter. And he wrote, "The shells fell incessantly, lighting up the night sky with fire and fury. It seemed as though the heavens themselves were against us, for there was no rest, no reprieve from the dreadful thunder of Washington's guns." Don't you just love hearing from an actual person that was there? It just brings everything more to life. I oftentimes spend probably too much time digging for letters and actual firsthand accounts, but that pretty much sums up what took place on that night. What the British did not realize yet was all of this bombardment was merely a diversion. Washington's real objective was actually to the south at Dorchester Heights. There, under the cover of darkness, his men were hauling massive cannons, some weighing over 2 tons, up the frozen slopes. Can you imagine? I can't even picture walking up a frozen slope at night in the middle of winter with a backpack, and these guys were, pulling 4,000 pounds up these slopes. And all of these cannons recently had been brought back from Fort Ticonderoga thanks to, again, Henry Knox. They were really the key to finally breaking the British hold on Boston. So while the British troops were in their trenches enduring all of this bombardment and shelling, Washington's men worked tirelessly. Hundreds of soldiers, laborers, and local militia moved tons and tons of dirt and timber to fortify the heights. The work was brutal. Frozen ground had to be chipped away. If you've never tried to dig a hole in the winter, it's not easy, and these guys had to do it. They didn't have a backhoe. It was all pickaxes and shovels and by hand. And heavy artillery then had to be dragged uphill, and it all had to be done, are you ready for this? In complete silence. How do you do this? One, but how do you do it in silence? Because you definitely didn't want to alert the British that this is what you were doing. It's been said and looked back on as one of the most incredible feats of engineering and determination. And what makes it even more remarkable is it was done in a single evening. So by the morning of March 5th, which was the anniversary of the Boston Massacre, the British woke up to quite an alarming sight. Dorchester Heights, which had been barren the day before, was now full with American fortifications and artillery, all of them aimed directly at the city of Boston and the British fleet in the harbor. General Howe, in the morning, when he saw what had been accomplished in one night, he said, "My God, these fellows have done more work in one night than my whole army would have done in a month." Now that's saying something. So Howe, now faced with an impossible situation, he understood immediately what Washington and these men had done. The American guns on Dorchester Heights commanded the harbor. If he stayed, his fleet would easily be destroyed, and if he attacked, he would actually have to have him and his army storm the heavily fortified positions from an exposed approach. There was nothing that was going to protect them. And he did not want a repeat of the disaster at Bunker Hill, and really kind of pushed Howe into a corner to the point where he didn't really have a choice. So over the next 2 weeks, negotiations and preparations were made for the British to get the heck out of Boston. Now, Howe warned Washington that if you fire upon my troops while we're leaving, we're going to burn the city of Boston to the ground. So Washington's sitting there saying, you know what? This could be a great victory that is not going to involve any of my Continental Army soldiers dying? He said yes, and he agreed, and he held back his guns. On March 17th, the British Army, along with loyalists, thousands and thousands of loyalists, they boarded the ships and sailed away from Boston. Where were they going? They initially thought they were going to go to New York, but they sailed to Halifax, Nova Scotia. And basically, for the first time since the war began, the city of Boston was finally free from any occupation by the British. And it was a momentous victory for Washington and the American cause. And you have to also picture wherever you live. Let's say you supported a movement and they have to leave, and you get on the ship, you take your family, some tried to take pets. Many of them were trying to take furniture and heirlooms and all of this stuff. Thousands and thousands of people. And most of them never returned to the United States. So they not only left because they had to, but many of them, most of them actually, never returned to America. So it was a sad deal on their side, but a huge, huge win for the American Continental Army. And the impact of the bombardment and the fortification of Dorchester Heights can't really be overstated. It marked the very first major victory for Washington and his army, and it proved that they could not only do incredible feats like they did, but they could actually outthink and outmaneuver the British military, the most powerful military in the world at the time. And it demonstrated the power of artillery and logistics. And without Henry Knox's daring transport of getting those cannons from Ticonderoga, Washington could have never pulled this off. It's sad that many people don't know about or even have heard of Henry Knox. I do a full episode on Henry Knox and his miraculous events and his trip of bringing these cannons back, so make sure you check that out. It's pretty, well, it's not pretty, it's completely amazing. But more importantly, what this did is it shifted the momentum of the whole war. So before March 1776, the Revolution had pretty much been, defense, defense, run, hide, defense, defense. But after Boston, it became clear that Washington was very capable of forcing the British to retreat. And it's pinnacle because it set the stage for future offensive movement, and it gave the Continental Army the confidence it desperately needed. If you imagine being in an army, Continental Army, going up against the most powerful, trained army in the world, and you are not winning anything, and many of your friends and people are dying next to you, and you run and you scurry and you retreat. This was a big deal. Morale in an army is huge. No different, well, yes, it's very different, my bad, but on a sports team, you see momentum on a sports team, and everybody gels, and the team comes together as one, and they're unstoppable. This gave the Continental Army some hope, and it gave them some confidence that, you know what, we're okay. We can actually take these guys on. John Adams, upon hearing the news that the British had evacuated, he wrote to his wife Abigail, and he said, "The die is now cast. The people have passed the Rubicon. We must now be a free, independent state or a conquered country." John Adams is so full of quotes. I think he was kind of a Nostradamus. If you look at what he said early on and then what happened, he called it. He was so in tune with what was going to happen. John Adams, just amazing, amazing guy. And thankfully, not good for him and Abigail, they were separated for eight long years during this war, most of the time. But thankfully for us, they wrote letters constantly. And now we have thousands of those letters back and forth to get some insight on them. But anyway.
Support comes from ServiceNow. We're for people doing the creative work they actually want to do. That's why this ad was written and read by a real person and not AI. You know what people don't want to do? Boring, busy work. Now with AI agents built into the ServiceNow platform, you can automate millions of repetitive tasks in every corner of your business, IT, HR, and more, so your people can focus on the work that they want to do. That's putting AI agents to work for people. It's your turn. Visit servicenow.com.
Clorox Sentiva smells like grapefruit. Cleans like Clorox. And feels like
Okay, we could be here all day. Try Clorox Sentiva for a trusted clean with long-lasting freshness. Also available in lavender and coconut. Use as directed.
The events of March 1776 weren't just a turning point. They were actually a turning point for the entire revolution. And Washington's leadership and the resilience and fortitude of his troops and the relentless pounding of American artillery had really changed the course of history. We've come to the part of the show called Unknown or Interesting Facts about today's topic. The nighttime bombardments that started on March 2nd were, in part, a bluff. Washington wanted the British to believe that the Americans were launching a major attack, so they fired their cannons without much accuracy. And some of the artillery was actually even fake. They painted logs black to make it look like cannons were set up in various places, so it appeared that the American firepower was much greater than it actually was. The constant fire over the several nights rattled Boston so violently that many residents thought that there was an earthquake taking place. With the way the building shook and many of the windows shattered, some Bostonians reportedly believed it was divine punishment. Washington's troops worked tirelessly to fortify Dorchester Heights in total darkness, and it was done so quickly that when the British woke up, it seemed like they had appeared magic overnight. In reality, hundreds and hundreds of men worked through the night using hay bales and barrels filled with earth to construct defenses. It was, as I've said many times, an amazing task to complete, but in one night, it's crazy. Considering that everything was done by hand, frozen ground, it would have been a really impressive task if it had been done in a couple weeks, but this was all done in one night. General Howe knew that the only way to remove the Americans from Dorchester Heights was a direct assault, just like Bunker Hill. He actually planned an attack for the night of March 5th, but a violent storm hit Boston, making it impossible for him to launch that attack. And that delay gave Washington even more time to reinforce his position, making a British attack disaster. So he planned to do it. Weather intervened and forced him to not do that attack. As the Americans hauled heavy cannons up Dorchester Heights, they again needed to be quiet. And to silence some of the noise, most of it, they laid out hay along the path and even wrapped the wheels of the wagons in cloth, which helped soften the sound. When Howe and his army and thousands of loyalists evacuated Boston, Washington did agree not to fire on them as long as they left peacefully. However, not everybody left. There were many British spies and loyalists who stayed behind, and they pretended to be patriots. Some of those actually eventually infiltrated Washington's army, allowing them to gather intelligence for the British. If you're eager to explore more, visit patriotpowerpodcast.com as there I have lots of resources waiting for you to dive in, discover, and learn more. If you'd like to support or sponsor the show, leave a review, or you have a question or idea for a bonus show topic, you can do all of that at patriotpowerpodcast.com. And don't forget, you can send me a text or leave a message on our Patriot Power hotline, which is 413-FREEDOM. Until next time, let's keep the torch of liberty burning and honor the courage and sacrifice of those who helped create our country. Stay vigilant, cherish your freedom, and together, let's keep the spirit of 1776 alive.
Thanks for listening, and hope that you tune in next time with us here at the Patriot Power Podcast. Make sure that you hit subscribe so you'll get notified when our new episodes are available for you. And we hope that you check out our websites, which include our show notes, links, documents, and more at patriotpowerpodcast.com or ilovegeorgewashington.com. Until next time, hope that you and your family have a blessed week. And remember, be safe and tell a veteran thanks for their service.